Chapter 6. Anyone passing along the Rue de Normandie might be pardoned for thinking that he was in some small provincial town. Grass runs to seed in the street, everybody knows everybody else, and the sight of a stranger is an event. The houses date back to the reign of Henry IV, when there was a scheme afoot for a quarter in which every street was to be named after a French province, and all should converge in a handsome square, to which La France should stand godmother. The Quartier de l'Europe was a revival of the same idea. History repeats itself everywhere in the world, and even in the world of speculation. The house in which the two musicians used to live is an old mansion with a courtyard in front and a garden at the back. But the front part of the house, which gives upon the street, is comparatively modern, built during the 18th century, when the Marais was a fashionable quarter. The friends lived at the back, on the second floor of the old part of the house. The whole building belongs to Monsieur Pillerault, an old man of 80, who left matters very much in the hands of Monsieur and Madame Cibot, his porters, for the past 26 years. Now, as a porter cannot live by his lodge alone, the aforesaid Cibot had other means of gaining a livelihood, and supplemented his 5% on the rental, and his faggot from every cartload of wood, by his own earnings as a tailor. In time, Cibot ceased to work for the master tailors, he made a connection among the little tradespeople of the quarter, and enjoyed a monopoly of the repairs, renovations, and fine drawing of all the coats and trousers in 3 adjacent streets. The lodge was spacious and wholesome, and boasted a second room, wherefore the Cibot couple were looked upon as among the luckiest porters in the arrondissement. Cibot, small and stunted, with a complexion almost olive-colored, by reason of sitting day in day out in Turk fashion on a table level with the barred window, made about 12 or 14 francs a week. He worked still, though he was 58 years old, but 58 is the porter's golden age. He is used to his lodge, he and his room fit each other like the shell and the oyster, and he is known in the neighborhood. Madame Cibot, sometime opener of oysters at the Cadran Bleu, after all the adventures which come unsought to the belle of an oyster bar, left her post for love of Cibot at the age of 28. The beauty of a woman of the people is short-lived, especially if she is planted espalier fashion at a restaurant door. Her features are hardened by puffs of hot air from the kitchen. The color of the heel-taps of customers' bottles, finished in the company of the waiters, gradually filters into her complexion. No beauty is full-blown so soon as the beauty of an oyster-opener. Luckily for Madame Cibot, lawful wedlock and a portress's life were offered to her just in time, while she still preserved a comeliness of a masculine order, slandered by rivals of the Rue de Normandie, who called her a great blousy thing. Madame Cibot might have sat as a model to Rubens. Those flesh tints reminded you of the appetizing sheen on a pat of Isigny butter. But plump as she was, no woman went about her work with more agility. Madame Cibot had attained the time of life when women of her stamp are obliged to shave, which is as much as to say that she had reached the age of 48. A porter's wife with a moustache is one of the best possible guarantees of respectability and security that a landlord can have. If Delacroix could have seen Madame Cibot leaning proudly on her broom handle, he would assuredly have painted her as Bellona. Strange as it may seem, the circumstances of the Cibots, man and wife in the style of an indictment, were one day to affect the lives of the two friends, wherefore the chronicler, as in duty bound, must give some particulars as to the Cibots' lodge. The house brought in about 8,000 francs, for there were 3 complete sets of apartments, back and front, on the side nearest the Rue de Normandie, as well as the 3 floors in the older mansion between the courtyard and the garden, and a shop kept by a marine store dealer named Remononc, which fronted on the street. During the past few months this Remononc had begun to deal in old curiosities, and knew the value of Pons' collection so well that he took off his hat whenever the musician came in or went out. A sou in the livre on 8,000 francs therefore brought in about 400 francs to the Cibots. They had no rent to pay and no expenses for firing. Cibot's earnings amounted on an average to 700 or 800 francs. Add tips at New Year, and the pair had altogether an income of 1,600 francs, every penny of which they spent, for the Cibots lived and fared better than working people usually do. One can only live once, La Cibot used to say. She was born during the Revolution, you see, and had never learned her catechism. The husband of this portress with the unblenching tawny eyes was an object of envy to the whole fraternity, for La Cibot had not forgotten the knowledge of cookery picked up at the Cadran Bleu. So it had come to pass that the Cibots had passed the prime of life, and saw themselves on the threshold of old age without 100 francs put by for the future. Well clad and well fed, they enjoyed among the neighbours, it is true, the respect due to 26 years of strict honesty. For if they had nothing of their own, they hadn't nothing belonging to nobody else, according to La Cibot, who was a prodigal of negatives. There wasn't never such a love of a man, she would say to her husband. Do you ask why? You might as well ask the reason of her indifference in matters of religion. Both of them were proud of a life lived in open day, of the esteem in which they were held for 6 or 7 streets round about, and of the autocratic rule permitted to them by the proprietor. Proprietor, they called him. But in private they groaned because they had no money lying at interest. Cibot complained of pains in his hands and legs, and his wife would lament that her poor dear Cibot should be forced to work at his age. And indeed the day is not far distant when a porter, after 30 years of such a life, will cry shame upon the injustice of the government, and clamour for the ribbon of the Legion of Honour. Every time that the gossip of the quarter brought news of such and such a servant maid left an annuity of 300 or 400 francs after 8 or 10 years of service, the porters' lodges would resound with complaints, which may give some idea of the consuming jealousies in the lowest walks of life in Paris. "Oh, indeed, it will never happen to the like of us to have our names mentioned in a will. We have no luck, but we do more than servants for all that. We fill a place of trust, we give receipts, we are on the lookout for squalls, and yet we are treated like dogs, neither more nor less, and that's the truth." "Some find fortune and some miss fortune," said Cibot, coming in with a coat. "If I had left Cibot here in his lodge and taken a place as a cook, we should have our 30,000 francs out at interest," cried Mme. Cibot, standing chatting with a neighbour, her hands on her prominent hips. "But I didn't understand how to get on in life, housed inside of a snug lodge and firing found and want for nothing, but that is all." In 1836, when the friends took up their abode on the second floor, they brought about a sort of revolution in the Cibot household. It befell on this wise. Schmucke, like his friend Pons, usually arranged that the porter or the porter's wife should undertake the cares of housekeeping, and being both of one mind on this point, when they came to live in the Rue de Normandie, Mme. Cibot became their housekeeper at the rate of 25 francs per month, 12 francs 50 centimes for each of them. Before the year was out, the emeritus portress reigned in the establishment of the 2 old bachelors, as she reigned everywhere in the house belonging to M. Pillerault, great-uncle of Madame la Comtesse Popinot. Their business was her business. She called them "my gentlemen." And at last, finding the pair of nutcrackers as mild as lambs, easy to live with, and by no means suspicious, perfect children, in fact, her heart, the heart of a woman of the people, prompted her to protect, adore, and serve them with such thorough devotion that she read them a lecture now and again, and saved them from the impositions which swell the cost of living in Paris. For 25 francs a month, the two old bachelors inadvertently acquired a mother. As they became aware of Mme. Cibot's full value, they gave her outspoken praises and thanks, and little presents which strengthened the bonds of the domestic alliance. Mme. Cibot 1,000 times preferred appreciation to money payments. It is a well-known fact that the sense that one is appreciated makes up for a deficiency in wages. And Cibot did all that he could for his wife's two gentlemen, and ran errands and did repairs at half price for them. The second year brought a new element into the friendship between the lodge and the second floor, and Schmucke concluded a bargain which satisfied his indolence and desire for a life without cares. For 30 sous per day, or 45 francs per month, Mme. Cibot undertook to provide Schmucke with breakfast and dinner. And Pons, finding his friend's breakfast very much to his mind, concluded a separate treaty for that meal only, at the rate of 18 francs. This arrangement, which added nearly 90 francs every month to the takings of the porter and his wife, made two inviolable beings of the lodgers. They became angels, cherubs, divinities. It is very doubtful whether the King of the French, who is supposed to understand economy, is as well served as the pair of nutcrackers used to be in those days. For them, the milk issued pure from the can. They enjoyed a free perusal of all the morning papers taken by other lodgers, later risers, who were told, if need be, that the newspapers had not come yet. Mme. Cibot, moreover, kept their clothes, their rooms, and the landing as clean as a Flemish interior. As for Schmucke, he enjoyed unhoped-for happiness. Mme. Cibot had made life easy for him. He paid her about 6 francs a month, and she took charge of his linen, washing, and mending. Altogether, his expenses amounted to 66 francs per month, for he spent 15 francs on tobacco. And 66 francs multiplied by 12 produces the sum total of 792 francs. Add 220 francs for rent, rates, and taxes, and you have 1,012 francs. Cibot was Schmucke's tailor. His clothes cost him on average 150 francs, which further swells the total to the sum of 1,200. On 1,200 francs per annum, this profound philosopher lived. How many people in Europe, whose one thought it is to come to Paris and live there, will be agreeably surprised to learn that you may exist in comfort upon an income of 1,200 francs in the Rue de Normandie, in the Marais, under the wing of a Mme. Cibot. Mme. Cibot, to resume the story, was amazed beyond expression to see Pons, good man, return at 5 o'clock in the evening. Such a thing had never happened before, and not only so, but her gentleman had given her no greeting, had not so much as seen her. "Well, well, Cibot," said she to her spouse, "Monsieur Pons has come in for 1,000,000 or gone out of his mind." "That is how it looks to me," said Cibot, dropping the coat sleeve in which he was making a dart, in tailor's language. End of chapter 6.